And so, in the same way, all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died in the resurrection. Therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. Jesus said to them, those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die anymore because they are like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now he is not God of the dead, but of the living. For to him, all of them are alive. The word of the Lord. There's a story about a young woman named Lila, who grew up in a small farming town. Family didn't have much, but she had a dream to be a doctor. Few in her community believed it was possible. Medicine's not for girls like you. You'll marry, have children, stay close to home. But Lila kept studying. She earned scholarships. She worked at nights at the local diner and never lost her dream. And years later, she returned to her hometown as a doctor, as the town's first female physician. When the local newspaper asked her why she came back, she said, because people here believed I couldn't do it. And I want the girls growing up now to see that they can. Lila's story is about perseverance. And it's also about transformation, about refining what's possible when old assumptions give way to new life. That same spirit of transformation stands at the center of today's passage in Luke. Jesus is confronted by those who cannot imagine a world beyond the categories that they have constructed. And he invites them to see that God's reality is far larger than their understanding. The scene begins with a group of Sadducees, religious leaders who prided themselves on logic and tradition. They did not believe in resurrection. Challenged Jesus. They posed this hypothetical situation about a woman who had been widowed multiple times, each time marrying a brother of her deceased husband as the law required. The question they asked was not pastoral in nature, the performance for others to see. They wanted to mock his belief in life after death. But at the center of their clever argument is a woman not treated as a person, but as a problem to solve. Her life, filled with grief and loss, is reduced to a legal puzzle. Jesus responds by not debating the legal details, but by revealing something deeper. In a life with God, relationships are not built on ownership or an obligation. In God's realm, no one belongs to anyone else because we all belong to him. Jesus restores dignity to the woman who others had used or had seen as an object. He lifts her from the margins of their argument and places her squarely in the heart of God's promise. To appreciate the power of the moment, we need to understand the world in which this story unfolds. In the ancient Middle East, women had little social or economic independence. Their security depended on being connected to a man. First their father, then their husband, and later their sons. The law of levirate marriage, cited by the Sadducees, was originally meant to protect widows from becoming destitute by ensuring that a brother would marry the widow and provide heirs if there weren't any. It was a way of preserving the family lineage and preserving the family property. But over time, the law also limited women's freedom and silenced their voices. They became defined by their roles in systems that had been created by men. And the question asked by the Sadducees to Jesus, that entire social structure comes into play. And Jesus' answer dismantles it. In speaking of resurrection, he proclaims a new order, not one governed by human hierarchies or by dependency, but by divine belonging. In God's future, there is no domination or no exclusion. We all live to God, and we are all children of the resurrection. Theologian N.T. Wright wrote, "Resurrection is not about escaping the world, but about God remaking it." In this passage, Jesus points towards that remaking, a vision of life in which women and men share equally in God's love and purpose. Throughout the Bible, women are often the unexpected bearers of God's promise. Sarah, who laughed at the thought of motherhood in her old age, became the mother of a nation. Deborah led her people when no one else would. Ruth, a foreigner, became part of the lineage of Christ. And Mary, a young woman with a humble background, became the vessel of divine hope. Even at the end of Jesus' earthly life, when many had fled, it was the women who stayed, who watched, who wept, who went to the tomb, and who were the first to proclaim the good news that he was alive. From beginning to end, the story of faith is woven with the courage of women. In our Presbyterian history, that same thread continues. For generations, women served as missionaries, teachers, organizers, without recognition or a title. They led Sunday schools, helped build hospitals, nurtured congregation members, got people through times of scarcity and change. And when our denomination began ordaining women to the ministry in 1956, it was not like some sudden innovation. It was an acknowledgement of what God had already been doing through faithful women for centuries. A few years ago, a small coastal town in Louisiana faced the devastation from Hurricane Katrina. The community was left without power, schools were closed, homes were ruined. And among the wreckage, a local woman named Denise, who was an elementary school teacher, decided that the children needed hope as much as they needed food and shelter. So she gathered volunteers to reopen the school gymnasium as a temporary classroom. They had no desks, no textbooks, and only a few supplies that they were able to salvage from the debris. But they had each other. Denise organized the lessons, read stories by flashlight, helped children write letters to classmates who had to relocate because of the flood. One of the parents later said, "She reminded us that life goes on, that God was still with us, even in the storm." And that's the essence of a resurrection faith. It's not merely about life after death. It's about the living God who meets us in the ruins of our lives and calls us to new life. When Jesus says that God is the God of the living, he means that no one is forgotten. Even those who have died are alive to God. The Sadducees could not imagine it. They couldn't imagine a reality beyond the structures of this world. But Jesus insists that God's love is not confined by death, by traditions, or by human limitations. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is also the God of Sarah, Rebekah, and Rachel, and the God of all who trust that love endures. To belong to God is to live with confidence that our worth does not depend on our status, our gender, or our accomplishments. It depends only on God's life-giving grace. So what does it mean to live as children of the resurrection? It means to live in hope, not fear, trusting that God's power to renew life is greater than any power that seeks to destroy it. Lila, the young woman who became a doctor, understood this truth, and she lived it. She didn't succeed only for herself, but in her success, she opened the door for others. Her story, not just the story of the widow and Jesus' teaching, reminds us that God's kingdom is built through those who trust that the world can be different and that love never dies. When we gather as a church, we bear witness to that hope. Every act of compassion is a declaration that the God we worship is not a God of the dead, but a God of the living. In the end, the question is not whose spouse someone will be in the resurrection or what rules will govern eternity. The question is much simpler, but more profound. To whom do we belong? And the answer is this: we belong to the living God, the one who knows our names, who restores our dignity, raises us to new life, and will never let us go. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.